They say a single word can change everything. For me, that word was okay, and it sealed the fate of my marriage in a way my wife never saw coming. Our once cozy home, where laughter used to echo, had turned into a silent battlefield. That Tuesday evening, the air was thick with unspoken tension, the lingering scent of a dinner she barely touched, a stark contrast to the life we'd envisioned. You know, Chloe and we'd been married for 6 years. And for the first 4, I honestly believed we were one of those couples, the ones who actually had it all figured out. We had our quirky routines, our silly inside jokes, our Friday night ritual of exploring new restaurants and reviewing them like we were Michelin critics. Our Sunday mornings? That was sacred. Coffee on the porch, talking about everything and nothing at all. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was ours. And I genuinely thought we were building something truly unbreakable, something that would last forever. But then, right around year 5, things started shifting. Subtly at first, like when you notice a tiny hairline crack in the wall, but tell yourself it's nothing serious. Chloe started coming home later. Her phone became an extension of her hand, always held at this weird, protective angle so I couldn't see the screen. Weekend plans? Constantly canceled, with vague, dismissive excuses about being tired or needing alone time. I tried, believe me. I tried talking to her multiple times. Is everything okay? Is work overwhelming? Do we need to see someone? But she'd just brush me off. Same old line. I'm just stressed, Rowan, I need space. And like a good husband, I gave it to her. I really did. I thought I was being supportive. In hindsight, I was just giving her more room to drift further and further away. And then her best friend, Harper, came back into the picture, but in a much, much bigger way. Now, Harper had always been around, lurking in the background. But suddenly, she was practically living at our house, 3, maybe 4 nights a week. And here's the crucial thing about Harper that you need to understand. She'd been divorced 3 times. And yet, somehow, she'd convinced herself this made her a relationship guru, not someone who clearly couldn't maintain a single one. Every time she showed up, she and Chloe would vanish. Into the bedroom. Out on the patio. And I'd hear these hushed, intense whispers, conversations that would abruptly stop the second I came anywhere near. After every single one of Harper's visits, Chloe would be noticeably colder to me. More distant. More dismissive. It was like Harper was slowly, deliberately poisoning her against me, dripping little bits of toxic advice into her ear. You deserve better, Chloe. Marriage is just settling. Men are all the same. Eventually, in my head, I just started calling Harper the marriage killer, because it seemed like everywhere she went, relationships just died. By the 6th month of this agonizing downward spiral, Chloe had completely checked out. Emotionally vanished from our marriage. We went from sleeping side by side every night to her suddenly needing the guest room because, apparently, I snored too loud. News to me after 5 years of perfectly silent nights. She stopped asking about my day. Stopped laughing at my jokes. Any form of physical contact? Gone. I tried everything. I planned a surprise weekend getaway to that mountain cabin she'd always dreamed of. She canceled last minute, too much work. I saved up for months to buy her this gorgeous anniversary necklace. She barely glanced at it before tossing it into a drawer. I suggested couples therapy again. She actually laughed in my face, like it was the most absurd suggestion she'd ever heard. Every single attempt I made to save us was met with either icy indifference or outright hostility. I was starting to feel like I was living with a stranger, someone who just happened to wear my wife's face. And then, the really obvious signs started. The kind you can't ignore, no matter how hard you try. Chloe suddenly had this entire new wardrobe, tighter dresses, outfits clearly designed for someone else's eyes, not mine. She chopped and dyed her hair into something dramatic, started wearing a full face of makeup to work when she'd always been the natural look type. Her phone? It became a third party in our marriage, constantly there, always demanding her attention, always more important than anything I had to say. Then came the networking events. These supposed events required her to dress up and come home at midnight, smelling of expensive wine and a cologne that was definitely not mine. I'd find receipts from restaurants we'd never been to, charges on our joint credit card for hotels in our own city. It made no sense, unless you considered the one explanation I was desperately trying to shove down. And then, there was the name. Noah. Noah texted her at bizarre hours. Noah needed her input on projects when no normal coworker would be working. Noah seemed to have unlimited access to my wife's time and attention in ways I no longer did. The absolute breaking point arrived on a Tuesday night in October. Just a completely ordinary evening until it wasn't. I'd made dinner, nothing fancy, just her favorite pasta, the way she used to like it. I'd set the table, holding onto a sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could have an actual conversation for once. Chloe came home late again. She barely glanced at the food, went straight for her phone. I took a deep breath. Please, I managed, as calmly as humanly possible, can we just talk about what's happening between us? I feel like I'm losing you and I need to understand why. That's when she looked up. And her expression, it was a mixture of contempt and utter exhaustion, a look I'd never seen directed at me. And then she said the words that would echo in my head for months. I'm not sleeping with you anymore, Rowan. That part of our marriage is over. You're basically just my roommate now. Deal with it. The way she said it, so casual, so matter-of-fact. Like she was telling me she'd switched coffee brands, not dismantling our entire life. I stood there in our kitchen, staring at this woman I'd promised to love forever. And something inside me, something I didn't know I had, just went cold. And perfectly, terrifyingly clear. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just looked at her. And in the calmest voice I've ever uttered, I said, okay. Then I walked out of the kitchen, went to our bedroom, grabbed my laptop, and I started planning. See, Chloe thought deal with it meant I'd just roll over. That I'd become her convenient roommate, paying half the bills while she did whatever with whoever. But what she utterly failed to grasp was that I was going to deal with it. Just not in any way she expected. I called my best friend Marcus that night. Told him I needed a place to crash and he didn't hesitate. My guest room is yours, man. For as long as you need it. That very night, I started moving my essential stuff out, bit by bit. Chloe was in the other room, completely oblivious that her casual cruelty had just activated a side of me she didn't even know existed. Over the next few days, I moved like a ghost through our house, gathering documents, making copies of crucial papers, snapping photos of anything that might become relevant. I opened a separate bank account at a completely different institution and quietly started redirecting my direct deposit there, leaving just enough in our joint account to cover my half of the bills and avoid immediate suspicion. Then I did something I probably should have done years ago. I sat down and actually read our prenuptial agreement. You know, the one we signed when we were young, naive, and so in love we thought we'd never need it. And there it was. In black and white legal jargon, a clause Chloe had either forgotten about or simply never bothered to read carefully. In the event of proven infidelity, the unfaithful party forfeits their claim to marital assets and spousal support. My lawyer father had insisted on including it. Young, idealistic me had felt almost guilty about it at the time. But sitting there, 6 years later, reading those words, I felt nothing but cold, calculated gratitude. Chloe had just handed me the keys to dismantle everything she thought was secure, and she didn't even know it yet. The game had changed. And for the first time in months, I was the one holding all the cards. Living at Marcus's place gave me a clarity I desperately needed. And having him there, as my rock, as a sounding board, it made all the difference in what came next. Marcus wasn't just my best friend since college. He's the kind of guy who sees through BS instantly and has zero tolerance for people who play games with other people's lives. When I told him everything that had been happening, he didn't waste a second on pointless sympathy or trying to see both sides. He just looked at me, serious, and said, "Rowan, you need concrete proof before you make any move." That's when he pulled this small, voice-activated recorder from his desk drawer. The kind private investigators use. "It's time to stop being naive," he told me, "and start protecting yourself. Recording Chloe, it felt like crossing some irreversible line. Like something I could never uncross. But then I remembered her face, that cold contempt, when she told me I was just a roommate. And all hesitation just vanished. The car was registered in both our names, and I'd been making half the payments. So legally, it was as much mine as hers. The next morning, I tucked the recorder under the passenger seat, a spot she'd never think to look. And then, I waited. For 3 days, nothing. Just her singing along to pop music, mundane work calls. But on day 4, I hit absolute gold. The kind of evidence that would make any divorce attorney salivate. Harper was in the car with her. And they were talking. Talking like I didn't even exist. Like I was some inconvenient obstacle they were strategizing around. Chloe's voice came through, crystal clear. Talking about Noah. About how he was everything I wasn't. About how being with him made her feel alive again, in ways she'd forgotten were even possible. Then Harper asked the question that made my blood run absolutely cold. Does Noah know you're still legally married? Chloe just laughed. Said she told him we were separated, basically divorced already, and that I was just dragging my feet on signing papers. The lies, they were so casual. So effortless. Like she'd been rehearsing them for months. But the worst part, the part that truly pulverized whatever feelings I had left, was when Harper asked her directly if she felt guilty. And Chloe's answer? A flat, chilling no. She'd stopped feeling guilty months ago because I was boring and predictable, and she deserved someone who excited her. I listened to that recording 5 times in Marcus's guest room. Each playback, it hurt a little less. And each time, I grew more determined. Marcus's reaction when I played it for him was exactly what I needed. Pure, unfiltered rage on my behalf. The kind of loyalty that reminds you why some friendships truly last forever. He didn't miss a beat. Immediately, he started helping me build a case that would be utterly bulletproof. We created a meticulous timeline of everything suspicious. Every late night, every unexplained charge, every work event that didn't quite add up. I started screenshotting text messages before Chloe could delete them. Downloading bank statements showing charges to upscale restaurants and hotels I'd never once set foot in with her. Documenting every single, glaring inconsistency in her stories. Then Marcus had another idea, one that felt a bit extreme, but proved to be absolutely crucial. He had a buddy, a private investigator, and for a reasonable fee, this guy could follow Chloe for a few days, documenting where she really went during those supposed networking events. The photos came back within a week. And they were damning. Chloe and Noah at a downtown hotel, the kind with hourly rates that no one uses for legitimate business meetings. Chloe and Noah having dinner at this incredibly upscale Italian place, holding hands across the table like giddy teenagers. Chloe and Noah in his car, in a parking garage, and I'll spare you the graphic details, but it was crystal clear what was happening. Each photo felt like a brutal punch to the gut. But strangely, they also felt like ammunition. Like I was building an arsenal to protect myself from whatever manipulative garbage she'd try to throw at me later. I took everything to a divorce attorney Marcus had recommended, a woman named Sarah. She had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless in court, but always fair. When I spread out all my evidence on her desk, the audio recordings, the photos, the receipts, the timeline, the text message screenshots, she just smiled. This, she said, is the most thorough documentation I've seen in years. She told me that cases like this, with an ironclad prenup and this level of proof, were about as close to a guaranteed win as you could get in family court. Sarah walked me through every step of what would happen when I filed. Chloe would be served at her workplace, humiliating, yes, but necessary to prevent her from hiding assets or destroying evidence once she knew what was coming. The prenup, with its undeniable infidelity clause, meant she'd get absolutely nothing. No claim to the house we'd built our life in. No spousal support. Just whatever personal items she could prove were solely hers. Sarah looked me straight in the eye. Are you sure about this, Rowan? Because once we file, there's no going back. Things are going to get ugly fast. I didn't even hesitate. My voice was steady. File the papers immediately. 2 days later, Sarah called me. And the news she delivered, it made everything brutally, undeniably real. Chloe had been served with the divorce papers at her office, right in front of her coworkers during an afternoon meeting. According to the process server, her reaction was a spectacular blend of shock and complete panic. Within an hour of being served, my phone started absolutely blowing up. Chloe called me 17 times in a row, every single call going straight to voicemail because I'd blocked her number the second we filed. Then came the texts from different numbers, from Harper's phone, from coworkers' phones. Each message more frantic, more desperate than the last. That same night, she showed up at Marcus's apartment, pounding on the door, screaming about how I couldn't just throw away 6 years of marriage without even discussing it with her first. The irony of that statement wasn't lost on me. Not for a single second. Considering she'd been throwing away our marriage for months without discussing a single thing with me. Marcus handled it perfectly. He opened the door, his phone already recording video, and calmly told her she had 60 seconds to leave his property before he called the cops for harassment and trespassing. She actually tried to push past him, tried to physically force her way into the apartment. And that's when I stepped into view, right behind him. The look on her face when she saw me there, that's something I will never forget. It was this chaotic mixture of desperation, rage, and utter confusion. Like she couldn't comprehend how her boring, predictable husband had suddenly grown a spine. That's when I did it. The thing I'd been planning for this exact moment. I pulled out my phone, opened the audio file of her conversation with Harper in the car, and pressed play. Her own voice filled the hallway. Talking about Noah. About lying to him about our marriage. About how I was boring, and she deserved someone better. I watched every ounce of color drain from her face as she finally, truly understood how utterly screwed she was. She lunged for my phone, tried to claim the recording was illegal, that it wouldn't hold up in court. Every desperate plea she could think of. But Marcus, cool as ice, calmly stated that we were in a one-party consent state, meaning recordings made in jointly owned property were perfectly legal and admissible. My attorney already confirmed everything's above board, he added, just for good measure. And then, who else but Harper showed up? Of course she did. She tried to spin the whole situation, painting me as the villain for spying on my own wife. That's when Marcus absolutely destroyed her with a single sentence I wish I'd recorded. You've been divorced 3 times, and you're giving marriage advice? That's like taking driving lessons from someone who's totaled every car they've ever owned. The confrontation ended with Chloe in a heap of tears on the hallway floor, Harper frantically trying to console her while shooting daggers at Marcus and me. And Marcus? He just firmly closed and locked the door. Inside the apartment, I felt something I hadn't felt in months, complete, undeniable control over my own life. My phone kept buzzing. Texts from Chloe's family, especially her mother, who apparently thought that screaming at me through text messages would somehow magically change my mind or guilt-trip me into submission. I saved every single one, forwarding them all to Sarah for documentation. And then I did something that felt incredibly, deeply satisfying. I sent Chloe's mother the entire evidence package. Every photo, every recording transcript, every damning receipt. With one simple message: this is why. She went completely silent after that. And from what I heard later through mutual friends, she apparently told Chloe to just sign whatever papers he puts in front of you, because fighting this would only make things worse, more public, and exponentially more expensive for everyone involved. The next 3 months were a masterclass in watching someone's life unravel, while mine, ironically, slowly rebuilt itself from the ground up. Chloe's lawyers tried everything. They fought the prenup, claiming it was signed under duress, or that the infidelity clause was unreasonably harsh, or whatever other desperate legal gymnastics they could invent. But Sarah shut down every single attempt with a precision that made me so damn grateful I'd hired her. The evidence was simply too solid. The prenup, ironclad. And most importantly, Chloe had absolutely no leg to stand on because she'd been caught red-handed, in ways that left zero room for any other interpretation. Her own legal team eventually advised her to just sign the settlement agreement and move on. Dragging it out would only cost her more money she didn't have and expose her affair even more publicly than it already was. The actual signing happened at Sarah's office on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. A part of me, a small, residual part, was actually dreading seeing Chloe again after 3 months of total silence. She walked into that conference room looking utterly different from the woman I'd married. Thinner. Older, somehow, with dark circles under her eyes and this deeply defeated posture. It would have made me feel sorry for her if I hadn't remembered everything she'd done. She tried the waterworks immediately, of course. Crying about her terrible mistakes, how we could still fix this if I just gave her one more chance. I looked at her across that conference table and felt nothing. No anger. No sadness. Just this cold, quiet indifference. And I think that hurt her more than any emotional outburst ever could have. Sarah guided us through the paperwork with professional, detached efficiency. When it came time for Chloe to sign, she hesitated. Looked at me one last time, a desperate plea in her eyes, as if I might suddenly change my mind. I just stared back. And waited. She signed. Just like that. 6 years of marriage. Ended with a signature on a legal document. What happened to Chloe after the divorce was finalized, it was almost poetic, how completely everything fell apart for her. Noah, her exciting affair partner, who made her feel so alive, dumped her within 2 weeks. Turns out, he was only interested in the thrill of an affair, the forbidden aspect of sneaking around. Once she was actually available, and came with the baggage of a messy divorce, he wanted absolutely nothing to do with her. She tried to cling to him, from what I heard through mutual friends, calling, texting constantly, showing up at his place unannounced. But he'd already moved on to someone new. And Harper, her toxic best friend, who'd encouraged all of this? She completely ghosted Chloe once the drama died down. See, people like Harper don't actually care about their friends. They care about chaos, about drama, about having someone vulnerable to manipulate. Once Chloe was no longer in crisis mode, no longer providing entertainment, Harper just vanished. Chloe ended up moving into a small, one-bedroom apartment across town. The kind of place that was a massive, soul-crushing downgrade from the beautiful house we'd built our life in. And from what I gathered through the grapevine, she spent most of her time alone, trying to figure out where on earth everything went so wrong. Meanwhile, my life? It was improving in ways I hadn't even imagined possible. During those dark months of watching my marriage implode, I bought a new house about 6 months after the divorce was final. Nothing massive, but it was mine. No memories of Chloe attached to any room, no lingering echoes of betrayal. I adopted a dog from the local rescue, a 3-year-old German Shepherd mix named Rocky. He had more loyalty in his furry body than Chloe had shown in 6 years of marriage. Marcus and I? We finally started that consulting business we'd talked about for years, but never had the courage to pursue. And it took off faster than either of us expected. Having a project to focus on, something completely separate from my failed marriage, gave me purpose and direction I desperately needed. I started going to the gym regularly. Not to prove anything to anyone, but because it felt genuinely good to take care of myself again. I even went on a few dates here and there, nothing serious, just little reminders of what it felt like to have someone genuinely interested in getting to know me, rather than just tolerating my presence. About 8 months after the divorce, Chloe started trying to contact me again. It began with a simple text, "How are you doing?" I ignored it. Then came longer messages, rambling about how she'd been in therapy, how she'd finally realized what she'd thrown away. Then more about self-improvement, how she understood now that she'd sabotaged the best thing in her life. Each message grew progressively more desperate, trying different angles to elicit any kind of response from me. She tried nostalgia, reminding me of good times. She tried guilt, talking about how lonely she was. She even tried anger, accusing me of being cold and unforgiving. None of it worked. Because I'd done something crucial during those months after the divorce, I completely detached. From her. From everything we'd been. She was just a person I used to know, someone from my past who no longer held any power over my present or my future. The final contact I had with anything related to Chloe was almost a year after the divorce. I ran into her at a coffee shop, completely by accident. She was with someone, a guy who looked visibly uncomfortable, constantly checking his phone like he was looking for an escape route. She saw me walk in, and I watched her face go through this whole journey of emotions: surprise, then a flicker of hope, then fear, and finally, resignation. I gave her a polite nod, the kind you'd give any stranger, ordered my coffee, and left without saying a single word. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't even feel particularly satisfied. I just felt free. That night, I got one last text from her. Just 3 words: "I'm sorry, Rowan." I read it, thought about responding for maybe 5 seconds, and then deleted it, without replying. Some apologies just come too late. Some betrayals are too fundamental to ever forgive. And some chapters of your life just need to stay definitively closed. Looking back now, almost 2 years after that Tuesday night when she told me to deal with being her roommate, I can say, with complete honesty, that her telling me that was the single best thing she could have done for me. It forced me to finally see clearly what I'd been desperately trying to ignore for months. It gave me the ultimate push to value myself enough to walk away. And it led me to a life that is infinitely better than the one I was settling for. I'm not bitter anymore. I'm not angry. I'm just profoundly grateful that I found the strength to deal with it the way I did. My life now? It's mine. Built on my terms. Surrounded by people who truly value me. And that's worth more than any marriage held together by obligation and one person's willingness to accept scraps of affection. This whole journey taught me that sometimes the hardest goodbyes lead to the most incredible hellos. If you've ever had to fight for yourself, or if you're going through something similar right now, what's your take on this? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one.